Welcome to the ReaderHouse Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. Misty Mason-Sulzman's new book, On Bellwether Brook, The Tale of Bart the Beaver. It deals with forgiveness and emotions. We're going to talk all about it right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Misty is here with me. Misty, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can you tell me all about On Bellwether Brook, The Tale of Bart the Beaver? What are readers going to find here?
They're going to find a story about beaver friends and how they connect and make friendships together, how one particular beaver, Bart, is working on just his temper and how to control it. And he loses his temper and has a couple falling outs with some of the beaver friends. And towards the end, he gets a little bit of advice from his parents, and he goes to his friends and just says he's sorry.
Misty, what sorts of readers were you writing for here?
Primarily just preschool to maybe first, second grade.
And how were you inspired to write this book, Misty? Where'd the idea come from?
Well, I'm actually a speech-language pathologist, and I've been doing this trade for 30 years. So I work a lot with preschool settings, and I have playground duty. So I've seen all these little events in real life in real time. So I just decided to write and capture a little book about it.
Have you ever done anything like this before?
No, I've never even thought about it. I was just fortunate to be able to just write it. And I actually had tucked it away, and it's been tucked away for about 25 years. And I actually had misplaced it, and I found it. And I was super excited about it because I thought about it. And then I decided that maybe I should just make a bucket list thing come true. And so I went ahead and had it published.
Well, that's great. Once you submitted it for publishing then, Misty, was that a long process?
Yeah, it was about a year from start to finish, primarily because it was already pretty much edited. I have my doctorate, so I'd already had quite a bit of experience with editing and whatnot, but it was like working with the illustrator and making sure that everything aligned to the pictures and to the word story. So yeah, it took a little bit of time because we'd go back and forth on corrections.
What was the most challenging part of the publishing process for you?
Probably just making sure that the pictures really captured the story, pretty much because I want to make sure that the illustrations kind of spoke for themselves and really aligned with the storyline.
What was it like for you, Misty, whenever that first copy finally came in of On Bellwether Brook and you got to hold this for the first time?
It's just real surreal because you're thinking, wow, this is out in Barnes & Noble, this is on Amazon. It was pretty exciting. I was able to get up with my small circle of friends, and they were all just super excited for me. It's not every day you get to see your book in the stores, and we actually have a store here called Wind City. It's in Casper, Wyoming, and they actually put it on their shelf. They really support local authors and that, so that was kind of fun to see it on the shelf.
And now that you're officially a published author, Misty, what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
I think just getting a story out there on how to handle problems and just having kids know how to solve conflict and how to do it in the right manner. And, it's a Christian book, so it talks a lot about it, just forgiveness and being gracious and merciful to your friends.
I love it. What are the chances we might see a follow-up to this or another kind of book from you in the future?
Well, one of my friends actually said I needed to have a follow-up, and I needed to name it Clint Eastwood as the main character.
Oh, I'd love it.
So I'm not really sure if I'll do another series or anything like that. It was like one of those things, a little bucket list thing that I wanted to try, and maybe I'll put something to paper again one day, but for right now, I'm pretty content.
It can be quite the learning experience going through the publishing thing for the first time. So, Misty, do you have advice now that you could offer to aspiring authors who are listening to us?
It's good to just make sure you're researching and making sure that whoever you choose is going to be able to hook you up with, doing interviews like this to help get your book out there. Once you start looking for a book, you're going to get a lot of offers and stuff. So I would highly recommend that you're just following up, making sure that it's a legitimate company.
That's really good advice. Well, I think children are really going to enjoy this book. Again, it's titled On Bellwether Brook, The Tale of Bart the Beaver. It's written by Misty Mason-Sulzman and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes and also at traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Misty, it's been really nice talking with you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on and telling me all about this.
Of course, and thank you for having me.
It's a memoir with a message of hope. It's the new book by Billy Smith titled From the Rags of Hell to the Riches of Heaven. And we're going to talk all about it. Billy is here with me now. Billy, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for calling.
Absolutely. I'm interested in learning more about From the Rags of Hell to the Riches of Heaven. Billy, can you tell me about it?
Well, it started out as a memoir of my life growing up, being so poor and destitute here in America, which a lot of people think, we don't have destitution like Africa or other countries, but we do. I wanted to go over my life about how I had to learn how to forgive to get forward in life, because the key of God's happiness getting in your heart is you have to forgive in order for the Father to forgive you. And so my book just goes through when I was a child, the rough lifestyle we lived, my dad being an alcoholic, being abusive. Goes all the way up to the bad choices I made through life, to finally when I gave my life to Christ November 18th, 2012, which was 30 years after I actually walked out of the church when I was 13. Not 30 years to the day, but around 30 years. And I got saved and I got filled with the Holy Spirit, and things just changed dramatically in my life. And I went from being financially strapped and eating barely any food a week to a flow of overabundance. God has just been so good to me. He took me from negative bank accounts to making me a millionaire, and I owe it all to God. I don't owe it to anybody but God, because God opened the doors for me. But in order for the doors to be open, faith without works is dead. So I had to work at things, and I had to trust what I read in the Bible to be true. Forgiving people that hurt you in your past opens a keyway to a new door. I had to forgive my dad for being so rough to us growing up. And he passed away 11/11/11. But I'd forgave him before that. I'd sat down with him, but I had to truly find forgiveness in my heart for God to be blessing me. I didn't really trust the tithing message at the time, because I didn't tithe. And it's in Malachi 3:8, will a man rob God? And it's a fact. Christians rob God all the time without realizing they're actually robbing a blessing from themselves. The first miracle I ever had happen to me, and I like to tell people this is the beginning of when I went from never, ever lacking again. And I ain't saying times didn't get tough for me, but I never lacked any food or money again after my first tithe. So I took one of my first checks about 2 months after I got saved, and I said, I'm going to try this. So I tithed, and I'm broke anyway. And I was standing outside of my patrol car looking up at the sky, and I said, Father, you said if I would tithe, you would open up the store window of heaven. And I said, I need $40 because I'm going to church. I was going into Wednesday morning. And I said, I just want 20 to buy me some food to the end of the week, and I want to bring 20 into your storehouse. And I tithed everything I had last week according to your word, the whole 10%. And I didn't have any money, didn't even pay some bills. The next morning I was praying, and I thought of this guy that was our chaplain. So I called him on the phone. I said, listen, man, I said, I really need $20. Now, take that I already told God I wanted 40. I said, I need $20. And I hadn't seen financial miracles. I had not seen anything. I didn't, but I knew if God said it, it had to be true. So I drive down where this guy's working a part-time job. He's a police chaplain. He comes walking out the parking lot. You see my patrol car. He goes, hey. I said, hey, man, how you doing? He said, I don't know. He said, I was walking across the parking lot, and the Lord told me to give you $40.
Wow.
And I never even asked him for 40. I asked him for 20, but I asked God for 40. And he said, and you know what else? He said, I overbooked myself working part-times here. And he reached in his pocket, and he said, they done paid me for a 10-hour day here, which was $220. Not only did he give me the 40, he gave me the 220 and asked me could I take a day's job for him because he couldn't work that day.
Wow.
So God not only gave me what I asked, but he gave it more abundant. And from then, I never stopped tithing to this day.
I know this book is going to bless a lot of readers. I encourage people listening to check it out. Again, the title is From the Rags of Hell to the Riches of Heaven. It's written by Billy Smith and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes and also at traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Billy, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this book. I had a really nice time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your help.
Author Karen Galves' new book, The Adventures of Penny Purse, is a tale with a great message. And I get to learn all about this. The author Karen is with me now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Karen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Corey.
Absolutely. Can you tell me about all what readers can find here in The Adventures of Penny Purse?
Well, it's a book to maybe guide children through some experiences that maybe they haven't had. It's just kind of a fun book to read. I used to read to my daughter when she was very little. Now she's an author, so you never know what's going to happen when you when you talk to your kids and you read to them. I was a very big avid reader when I was young.
So this is a book you would say for younger children as opposed to a little bit older?
Yes, I would say maybe, well, you can start reading to your children at any time. I mean, to be honest with you, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I used to read to her when she was still in my belly. So
I love it.
Any age up until maybe 7, this book is good for that age group.
Karen, how did the idea for Penny Purse come about?
I was looking in my closet one day and I have a purse. And I looked at, I don't know why, I looked at it and I went, that would be a really cute character for a book. And so I just got the idea and started writing it down. But that was a long time ago. I didn't publish it right away. It's probably been 18 years since I wrote the first book. Yeah, I decided that this was the time for me to start a new career and get the message out to the kids and their parents. So here it is.
So you've never done anything like this before when it comes to writing or being published?
I used to write for a health website here in San Diego, but a long time ago. And I would write about herbs and vegetarianism and things like that to help people to, make their lives a little bit healthier. That was the only thing that I did as far as writing goes.
Once you submitted this to the publisher, you got into that publishing process. How long was that for you? Did that go quickly?
It didn't because it was my first time. And to be honest, I was a little nervous and a little maybe scared of doing it. My very first time. And so it took me a little longer. So I submitted it in September of 22 and it got published in November of last year, 23. That's just because I was kind of dragging my feet because I was scared.
What did you find the most challenging part of the publishing process?
Probably because I was just concerned that people wouldn't like it. And I did have a tendency, not anymore, but I did have a tendency to listen to people and what their opinion was of my writings.
And the illustrations are really important in a children's book like this. Was that a smooth process, getting those illustrations to line up with what you wrote?
Yes. Actually, the characters were very easy for me. I just told them what I wanted and what they looked like, and we had maybe a couple of small minor changes, but it turned out very well. I was very happy with the illustrations.
When that day came, Karen, and open up your mailbox, and there it is, finally, the first copy of Penny Purse. You got to hold it in your hands and look at it. Your name's on the cover and everything. What was that like?
A little bit tearful, very proud that I was actually able to finally accomplish it after so many years. So, I was very pleased, very proud of the end result.
Do you think we'll see Penny Purse on another adventure in the future, maybe a follow-up book or some other kind of writing?
Yes, I actually have 2 other ones written, so it'll be like a series.
Fantastic. So now, Karen, you're officially a published author. What's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
Being recognized, being recognized as a published author.
When you're writing, do you ever experience writer's block or anything like that?
I haven't with the children's. The children's came very easy for me. It flowed very well. So I had the idea, I knew what I wanted to do, and it just kind of came right out of my pen.
Do you have any words of advice now that you could offer to aspiring authors?
Don't give up. Do not give up. Make sure that you follow through with what you want to do. Don't let anything or anybody deter you. That's what I would say to them. Don't give up.
Well, this book has a great message. Again, the title is The Adventures of Penny Purse. This is written by Karen Galves, and it's published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it everywhere, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Karen, thank you again for telling me all about your work. I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Oh, thank you, Corey, for inviting me.
I'm holding a new book, and it's an encouraging resource for spiritual empowerment. It's co-written by Michael Wing and Victoria Junkins, and it's titled The Wisdom and Insight of Matthew Henry, Helping Modern Christians Strengthen Their Walk with God. And we're going to talk all about this book now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Co-author Michael Wing is here with me. Michael, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. Michael, can you tell me about the wisdom and insight of Matthew Henry? What do readers find here?
Well, Matthew Henry, in my opinion, was undoubtedly one of the greatest theologians of all time. He is a 17th century writer, largely self-taught, but even to this day, several hundred years later, his exhaustive commentary on the Bible is still considered to be one of the best. Very insightful, very direct. And the premise of the book was to take all of those thousands of pages in Matthew Henry's book and provide a concise version with lots of nuggets and pearls of wisdom drawn from Matthew Henry's work and tremendous insight.
How did the idea for this book come about, Michael?
Well, I had developed a process years ago where I tried to go through the Bible every verse at a time with a commentator. And several years ago, I had chosen Matthew Henry and was just absolutely astounded. Having gone through the Bible several other times with other commentators, I just found Matthew Henry's to be off the chart. It was so insightful, so incredible, so superior. I was thinking, I've got to figure out a way to share this with other people, just because it would be a profound contributor to people's spiritual formation. And thus, the idea was hatched. It took almost 7 years to put it all together in its present form.
Then when it comes to the publishing end of things, was that a long process as well?
Actually, the publishing process was a joy. It was a delight. People I was blessed to work with shepherded us through the process greatly. And in comparison to all the work and the years it took to put it all together, the publishing part was a joy.
And what were you thinking? What were you feeling whenever that first copy finally came in and you got to hold this for the first time?
Oh, it was great. It was wow, now it's actually real. The realization of a dream, and that we'll now be able to make this available to a lot of people. You know, it doesn't replace the Bible. It's a complementary tool. I looked at it as a way to help people operationalize their faith. When they read through the pages of our book, I truly believe they can't help but be motivated and compelled to strengthen and further develop their walk with God. And that was the goal, is to try and help augment, enhance, and motivate people's spiritual formation.
When it comes to being published, writing books and everything, Michael, are you new to this, or have you done this kind of thing before?
Well, I'm a lawyer. I've been a long-time lawyer and corporate CEO of several companies over the years. And so many years ago, I had written a book that was on maximizing organizational performance. So I've been through the process before, but of course, in the years that have passed, the process has become a lot more streamlined. It's a lot more digitized, given technological advancements. So in respect, this way was even more pleasant, easier, not as many iterations and not so many handling of pages all the time. It was all digitized.
And now you're a published author, Michael. What's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
I'm receiving notes or calls from people who say, Mike, gosh, I really love this book. Thanks for writing it. It's been an inspiration to me. It's helping me with my walk. That's the joy, is to try and get people more focused on the Word, on a stronger walk with God. And to Him be the glory. If people are able to use this book as a tool to operationalize their faith and strengthen their faith, there's just a lot of joy with that.
What are the chances that we'll see something else published by you in the future, another book or something?
There is another book coming out in mid to late April. It deals with some public policy issues on prison reform, drawn upon a lot of my decades of work as a lawyer, trying to see if we can't get some more social justice in play to improve that system.
Now, you're talking about the publishing process being a really smooth one for you. Michael, was there anything particularly challenging about that for you?
I think the tediousness of proofreading, technology is great in so many ways, but when it comes right down to it, you've got to proofread the templates, you've got to proofread all the text. It's back to old school, and that's certainly time-consuming.
Well, indeed, Matthew Henry's writing is full of wisdom, and this book is going to bring that to a lot of people. Again, it's titled The Wisdom and Insight of Matthew Henry, Helping Modern Christians Strengthen Their Walk with God. This is co-written by Michael Wing and Victoria Junkins, published by Christian Faith Publishing, so pick it up over on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or also down the street at your local bookshop. Well, Michael, thank you again for joining me and telling me about this book. I had a nice time chatting with you tonight.
Well, thank you. The pleasure was mine.
I'd like to welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, author B.R. Benson. Bonnie, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on again.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here as well. I'm glad to be talking about your new book, Inside a Christmas Snow Globe. Bonnie, can you tell me about it?
Well, it's about a little girl that goes to visit her grandparents, which she does just about every year about Christmas time. And this time, her and her mother go to a little tea at an antique shop where they have like high tea and they have tea and crumpets. And she notices a little snow globe in there, and they have tea and they with a bunch of other parents with their kids, and they go home, and she's really tired and goes to bed, and she dreams about the tea, and she wakes up and she's inside of the snow globe, and she smells cookies baking, and there's a little white-haired lady baking the cookies, and it's Mrs. Claus, and all these kids are out there playing, and it's the same kids from the tea, and they're out there playing in the snow, and Santa Claus is giving sleigh rides, and that's about it.
Where did the idea for this come from, Bonnie? What was your inspiration?
Well, my daughter, or mainly my grandsons, would come for Christmas time. I like having their own kind of decorations, and I like collecting snow globes. And so I'd look at them, and I thought, well, what would it be like to be in one? What would it be like to live in them, you know? And you'd shake them, and it would snow. And I had some that you would wind up and turn on, and the snow would blow. So that was kind of where I got the inspiration. So got the idea.
Was it a long journey writing and publishing Inside a Christmas Snow Globe?
Not really, because it came so close after the first book, Bonnie the Seagull That Wouldn't Fly. So, you know, they just came one right after another, and I had a really good person helping me there at my publisher. So they really helped.
Being your second book, would you say that this one was easier than the first overall?
Yes, it was easier because it was really kind of close to my heart, and my imagination just took over, and away I went.
In a book like this, the illustrations are so important. Bonnie, was that a smooth process getting the illustrations to line up with your vision and what you wrote?
Yes, it was. I only had one correction working with the illustrators, and they were spot on when we were working together. I just, like I said, I had only one correction, and that was it.
Sounds like you had a pretty smooth publishing process. Was there anything about that you found particularly difficult this time?
Basically timing, and my time to go through and align everything, you know, putting the words to the illustrations and getting it all coordinated and then getting it back to the publisher in a timely manner. That's the hardest part.
Like I said, this is your second book, so does that feeling ever get old whenever it finally comes in the mail and you get to hold your book for the first time?
No. It's like Christmas and your birthday all rolled in one.
So looking ahead, Bonnie, do you have plans to maybe write another book?
Well, I've got one. It's going through the publishing process now. And then I've got one idea, but I've got to do a little research on it before I go forward. So, you know, I don't want to stop. I want to keep going.
And when you're writing fiction, Bonnie, do you know pretty much how the story is going to go from beginning to end and everything that happens? Or do you start with an idea, like with the Christmas Snow Globe, and start writing and kind of see what story unfolds?
Yeah, that's basically it. And the hard part is getting your characters, getting their personality, and figuring out who they are and how they're going to get involved in the story, and then how the outcome's going to be. And you got to draw it all together.
Was writer's block ever a thing for you?
I haven't yet. You know, I've only got almost 3 books done, so I'm really kind of new at this. I just got to come up with ideas. That's the hardest part.
I think children are really going to love this book. Again, the title is Inside a Christmas Snow Globe. It's written by B.R. Benson and published by Hawes and Junkins Publishing, so find it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or even down the street at your local bookshop. Well, Bonnie, I really appreciate you talking with me here again and telling me about Inside a Christmas Snow Globe. I had a good time.
No, I'm glad you did because I did too.
The audiobook edition of Anthony Taranto's book, The Art of Thinking, has just been released by the Audiobook Network, and we're talking all about it here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author, Anthony, is here with me. Anthony, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with me.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. I'm excited to learn about The Art of Thinking. Anthony, can you tell me about it?
Being a philosopher and a Christian, I wanted to tell the world about how I think and what I believe is the correct way of thinking. And it's to help out people who are confused about what people believe in this world to be true, which is not always correct.
And what was the inspiration for this? What sparked you to sit down and get started?
Well, I was a pretty much normal person growing up. I was a Catholic, and I led a pretty normal life. I was a construction worker, and when I was around 21, my mother took me to a psychiatrist, and I got put into the mental health system, diagnosed with all sorts of mental illnesses, forced to take all kinds of psychiatric medications against my will. And I realized that that is the world that I'm talking about, which is so based on lies and everything. And the whole time I was in these hospitals and everything, I constantly studied the Word of God, the Holy Bible. And I really became knowledgeable about God's Word. And I realized how the mental health system is the opposite of that, and it's Satan's world. And I wanted to explain to the people of the world my point of view rather than what most of the world believes is true. So when I moved to Colorado in 2002, I got put into a jail for something that I didn't do. And that's when I decided the best way for me to try and get myself justified and to also help out the people of the world is to write about my experiences and the way that I think. And that's why I wrote the book, The Art of Thinking. It was the first book that I wrote when I was there.
Were you writing toward a specific reading audience, do you think?
No, not specifically. I wasn't at the time, but now that I've done it, I think that it's going to tend to stick with a younger audience. I've been told that a child could read my book, and when I first got contacted by Audiobook Network about getting my books put online, the man told me that millennials no longer really read books, that they get everything on audiobooks and they just listen to the books. And that was the new trend in book publishing, is getting them put on audiobooks. But I didn't know anything about this until I got contacted by Audiobook Network.
How long of a process was it for you to get this published and to get the audiobook produced?
Well, I came back to Philadelphia in 2019, and that is when I started the process of getting it published, first by Christian Faith Publishing in hard copy. And then after that, once Audiobooks contacted me and we started that process of getting this first one put onto audiobooks, it probably took another year. Yeah, so that's been 5 years now.
And Anthony, now that you are a published author, what is the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
Well, just knowing that I did it, and I'm trying to help out the people in the world by doing God's will, which I believe He wants me to put what I've learned and the wisdom that I've gained through my experiences to put them into books that I've written. I'm getting it done, but it's getting done slowly because it's a kind of expensive process for me, and I don't have a lot of money. So it's taking some time, but it is rewarding that at least I'm getting them out there and they're available to the public.
Have you given thought to writing more, publishing more after this?
Yes, I sure have. When I first submitted my books to Christian Faith Publishing, I submitted 5 books, and they approved all of them. So it's just a process of I can really only afford to get one published at a time. So those will be the first 5, and 2 of them are published already with them. The other 3 I'm going to start. The next one's going to be Christianity versus Psychiatry, Mental Health or Mental Illness. And from there, I will get the other 3 published. And since I've been in Philadelphia, I've also been writing. I have 3 more books that I'm writing now.
Well, I know the readers and audiobook listeners will really enjoy this book. Again, it's titled The Art of Thinking. It's written by Anthony Taranto and published by the Audiobook Network, so pick it up at Audible or iTunes or Amazon, wherever you normally pick up your audiobooks. Anthony, thanks again for joining me here on the show and telling me all about this. I had a nice time talking with you tonight.
I did too, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sitting here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable is author Marlene Wilson. Marlene, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I wanted to say congratulations. You have a new book out. It's titled A Childhood in God's Arms. Get in touch with incest and how to get past the pain, a self-help book. Marlene, can you tell me more about this?
It's an autobiography of myself, of what I experienced as a child and even into my adulthood. What helped me in getting past the pain will help others.
What sorts of readers were you looking to reach here?
The ones that have experienced incest of their father or aunt or uncle or whatever relative that molested them as a child. A lot of people that have gone through that kind of experience, a lot of them commit suicide or they turn to drugs or alcohol or promiscuous living. My book would help them so they wouldn't do that.
Well, this must have been a tough book for you to write, such a personal story, Marlene. What persuaded you to write this and publish it?
Well, when I was in a place, they call it True North, it was a place where people have breakdowns, and you have to stay there for weeks and find the right medication. I went to the doctors because I couldn't sleep at night. I had recurring memories of the abuse that I kept shoving down. I was unrepressing. After I got out of that hospital, it's almost like I was inspired to write to get this pain out. So I just went to every library I could find to find every information I can on incest. And I read, and even my daughter read too. And while I was recounting my memories of what my dad did to me, my daughter spoke out and said, Grandpa did the same thing to me.
Oh my gosh.
So I got her into reading, and we both read together of all the different things that you experience of unrepressing memories and getting past the pain.
How long did this take to write and get published?
Well, I was in the hospital in 1991, and so it was about the middle of the year of 91. I decided just to try to write. I couldn't put anything in words because I was so repressed. I was inspired through God's Word, through God, to get started and get past all this pain because it just takes a hold of your life. You want to kill yourself, because you have all this pain. And you can't get rid of this pain unless you get into the pain and get past it.
What was that moment like for you, Marlene, whenever you got to hold your first copy of A Childhood in God's Arms? It must have been something.
Oh, that was amazing. I didn't believe I could ever get a book published. And when they said, yep, we're publishing your book, I didn't say anything. And they said, did you hear me? I said, yeah, I was more like a state of shock. I couldn't believe I did it. I finally did it. And it was I was just so thrilled.
When it comes to the publishing process that you went through, Marlene, what was the most challenging part of that for you?
I wasn't a very good typer. I typed in school, but I forgot most of it because I was in junior high. So I got one of these, what you call a dragon, that you put on your computer. And you just speak into it, and it types it out. And then you read what you have spoke, and you have to correct some of it because they misunderstand some of the words you say. And it was a lot easier, but it's very challenging. It just takes time to. I about drove my husband crazy because he knows how to type and listen to me speak at the same time, and he was a lot of help to me.
Again, this is titled A Childhood in God's Arms. Get in touch with incest and how to get past the pain, a self-help book. It's written by Marlene Wilson, and it's published by Covenant Books. So you can find it everywhere. Get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or also at traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Marlene, thank you so much for coming on the show and telling me about your story and about this book and everything. I had a nice time talking with you tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Father John F. Tuohey has written a book, and it's titled Striving to be Perfect as the Heavenly Father is Perfect. And I get to find out all about this book. Father John is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. John, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for being with me. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time, John. Can you tell me what readers are going to find when they open up Striving to be Perfect as the Heavenly Father is Perfect?
Well, they're going to find a slice of my life. I went over the bridge with alcoholism about 2015, and it's been quite a ride for the last 10 years. And that's really what the book is. It's trying to figure out my way through forgiving other people, forgiving myself, finding forgiveness, and just learning what it means to be a sober, mature Christian.
So what inspired you? What gave you the idea to write your story and publish it for the world?
Well, that's interesting because I'm working on a book on Pope Paul VI. He was Pope 63 to 78, and his peace initiatives. He was the first Pope to go to the United Nations. But I was struggling with resentments, and it was just bothering me. And I just said, Pope Paul, you got to sit in the back. I need to work on this. And so I just needed to write down. And so I started with forgiveness, then expanded it to, forgiveness is about maturity. So that was the first essay. And if I'm going to forgive others, I need to seek forgiveness for myself. So that was the third essay. So it's 3 essays. And it really just started because I just needed to say, you know what, John, you got to write it down. That's a big AA thing. You have to write it down. So that's how it started.
Were you writing for a specific readership here, do you think?
I was writing for myself, to be honest with you. But I taught moral theology for 10 years at the Catholic University of America, and for 20 years, I was on a medical faculty of Oregon. So my whole adulthood has been, if I write it, somebody else is supposed to read it. So I just, I wrote it and I fine-tuned it, and I thought, well, let's put it out there and see if somebody will find it helpful. I didn't write it for a large audience, but as I say, my experience is if I write it, I should submit it for publication, and Christian Faith Publications picked it up.
John, are you new to the whole writing and publishing thing?
On the book side, yes. On the article side, because of my academic career, they always say publish or perish. Most of my experience has been writing articles, mostly medically oriented. This is very spiritual and personal, and that's unusual for me. And the history I'm writing on Paul VI. So yeah, I'm in a new genre.
Well, once you sat down, started writing this, John, was this a long journey for you, clear through when it got published?
No, actually, it went quite quickly. I guess within 6 months from when I told Pope Paul to set aside and started focusing on what I needed to see myself say. I would say about 6 months. Actually, it came together quite quickly, mostly because the material in it is very familiar to me. It was just applying it to my new situation.
And then there's the publishing end of things. There's a lot involved there. John, what did you find the most challenging part of the publishing process?
Well, I will say the publisher is very keen on running everything by the author, so just keeping up with them. But also I was struggling with sobriety, so staying sober and working with them at the same time. That was a challenge to me.
Then after all the hard work that you put into this, that day finally comes and you get your first copy in and you finally get to hold your book for the first time. John, what kind of a moment's that like?
Oh, well, that's funny you say that because when I got it and could actually hold it, so I thought, I need to read this. So in the introduction, it says that it's semi-autobiographical, and I read it for myself, and there's nothing semi about it. It's all about me trying to be sober, just a little slip of my life on sobriety. Yeah, so actually holding a book where I actually spoke, it caused me to step back and say, you know what, John, it's not semi-autobiographical. It's a slice of my life, trying to stay sober and hopefully helping other people to do the same.
What are the chances we'll see another book from you in the future, do you think?
Oh, they're real good because I just have one more chapter to finish on this book on Pope Paul VI and his peace initiatives. So that should be done in the next couple of weeks. That'll go off to that publisher.
Well, I think a lot of people are going to be blessed by this book and find help and hope in its pages. Again, it's titled Striving to be Perfect as the Heavenly Father is Perfect. It's written by Father John F. Tuohey and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also at traditional brick-and-mortar stores. John, thank you again for joining me tonight, telling me about your work. I had a nice time chatting with you.
Thank you very much. This was great. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
There's a sweet story of a young girl's journey of faith on the first day of school. in the new book written by Jewelz Collie titled Lula's First Day of School. And I get to find out all about it. The author, Jewelz, is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Jewelz, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you tell me all about Lula's first day of school? What are readers going to find here?
Lula's a young girl going to her first day of school, but before she goes to school, she feels all these butterflies and jitters within her. She involves her parents, and her parents notice that she's nervous, and so they join with her in prayer, and those nervous butterflies are all gone.
Jewelz, what sorts of readers do you think would love this the most?
I would say kids anywhere from 3 to 9 years old.
So how did the idea for this come about? What inspired you to write this?
The Lord put it on my heart, and also part of it is the relationship my daughters have with my husband, with their dad, how we turn to prayer and everything, and how he's led our household in that way.
Whenever it comes to writing and publishing and everything, Jewelz, have you ever done this kind of thing before?
No, I haven't. This was my first book, first time doing this, and the Lord really, he led the way the entire way.
Was it a long process for you?
No, it was not. It came to me, I was cooking dinner, the Lord put it on my mind, I sat down and I wrote it, and word for word it came to me. When he put it on my mind, I just wrote it all out.
And a lot of new authors can be surprised a lot of times at how much is involved in the publishing end of things. Jewelz, what did you find the most challenging part of that end?
I worked with a really good publisher, so there wasn't too many challenges. I would say trying to make what I had the vision in my head come to life with the illustrators. It's hard to describe to people what you're seeing in your head.
So, Jewelz, that day finally comes, and you open up your mailbox, and there it is. Lula's first day of school finally arrived at physical copy. What was that like when you finally got to hold it?
It was very joyful, happy tears. I felt like I did it. I accomplished something.
And now it's official. You are a published author. So what's the most rewarding aspect of that for you?
For me, it's that my books will reach a child and hopefully touch their heart and lead them to the Lord if they don't know the Lord already.
Have you given thought to maybe a follow-up to this one or some other sort of writing in the future?
I don't have a follow-up to this one. I'm actually in the process of writing another book called Abba, another children's book that will be out in a few months.
Jewelz, whenever you sit down to write, is writer's block ever something you have to deal with?
Oh, yes. Especially when it's writing about me. In the back of the book about the author or what the book's about, it's hard to put it into words, that part. I can do the rest, but that part's the hardest for me.
Do you have a strategy, something you do to get those words flowing again?
No, I just let it be. It'll come when it comes. I just let it be.
I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way of doing this for the first time. So, Jewelz, what advice now would you have for aspiring authors out there?
To just do it. Go for it. Just jump in and do it.
When you're writing, Jewelz, do you have sort of a time that you like to do it every day? Maybe first thing in the morning, maybe late at night? Or are you the kind of writer that just writes whenever you feel that inspiration coming on or whenever you can just find that little pocket of time to write?
If a story comes to my mind, I'll write it in my notes. And then when I feel like it's ready, I just don't have a time. I just do it. And that's the joys of having ADHD. Just go on a whim.
Now, when you come up with a story, Jewelz, and you sit down, start to write it, do you know how the whole thing is going to play out from beginning to end? Or do you have maybe just a character or a situation in mind and you start writing and see where it goes from there?
I kind of do a little outline of what I want and the main points that I want to focus on. And then I will go point to point and turn it into a story.
Well, I think a lot of children are going to be blessed by this book. Again, the title is Lula's First Day of School. It's written by Jewelz Collie and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so pick it up at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. But Jewelz, thank you so much again for coming here on the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable and telling me all about this. I had a nice time talking with you tonight.
Thank you for taking the time to do this with me.
Author Scott Andersen tells an emotional story in his new book, Danny and the Corporate Ladder, the story of a good guy, a hard choice, and the life that led up to it. And I get to find out all about this book. Scott is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Scott, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my book.
I appreciate your time, Scott. Can you tell me all about it? What can readers expect in Danny and the Corporate Ladder?
Well, it's a story of a person, and it's actually a bunch of real people kind of combined into one person. But it's the story of a person who makes a number of, hard choices in life. And like all of us, goes through the various components and parts of their life, learning and gaining and becoming a better person. But it's also the story of somebody who truly is a very loyal human being. His best friend, who is the narrator, who we never meet, by the way. You'll never hear the narrator's name in the book, and that's on purpose. His best friend has been his best friend since kindergarten. So, they grew up in a small town. They explored the world around them and became adults, and they actually lived right next door to each other in their adult years. And I guess that's it, other than the flying snapping turtles part, which is my personal joke in the book.
Scott, what sorts of readers were you writing for here?
I had that question a couple times, and I love the question. It's really hard to answer because I really was writing for people that have a willingness to go on flights of fancy. The views that Danny takes of the world and the narrator shares of Danny's takes on the world, they're whimsical at times. They're intended to be light, not heavy. And I think I wrote it for kind of, everybody. I actually restarted the book. I wrote the book 30 years ago before my kids were born. And then I came back to it and I threw it away. And I said, okay, I don't want to, I broke it into two books. I'm working on the other book now. But then I kind of pulled it together and it became the story of this person. And so based on that, I kind of wrote it for everybody that lived through COVID. It's kind of a good guys win story that came out of my personal COVID experiences.
So how did this book come about, Scott? Where did the idea for it come from?
Honestly, Danny and the Corporate Ladder originally, so this is 30 years ago, was written based on a newspaper article. I was living at the time in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I went back to visit my parents in Bloomington, Indiana, and I read the local paper. At the bottom, and don't ask me why, right? When you're reading the newspaper back in the day, this is, right, the lost art of newspaper reading. Mm-hmm. People miss out on that, right? I was reading the newspaper, and I saw an article. And I read the article 3 or 4 times, and I kept looking at it thinking, why? Why would you do this? And it was the story of the state of Indiana trying to get rid of the fish known as crappie in Lake Monroe. Not all of them, just to decrease the population of crappie in the waters of the reservoir that was near my house called Lake Monroe. And so they had invented this concept called a crappie-thon. And what they'd done is put tags on fish, the crappie, and re-released them in the lake. And if you caught it and brought it to the state, they gave you money. So that's where the origin of the idea came from. And then 30 years later, when I got back to writing, when my kids were, settled and all out, and I found myself with extra time again, I kind of recreated it as the story of the nice guy. And then, as I said, I'm working on the second version of it now, which is the story of that fishing, that crappie-thon, and what happens when you happen to be the lucky person that hits fish number 1. That's kind of the genesis.
So, Scott, why do you do it? What's the most rewarding thing for you about being a published author?
I'll tell you. I have a friend who lives in Nashville, and he was one of the very first people that bought my book. And every once in a while, he'll post on either Facebook or LinkedIn. He'll post, kind of a snide comment directly from the book to me. Every time he does that, I just stop for a second, and I just think, wow, I wrote that. I created it. So I think that's it.
Well, I think readers are going to love this book. I encourage everyone listening to seek it out. Again, the title is Danny and the Corporate Ladder, the story of a good guy, a hard choice, and the life that led up to it. This is written by Scott Andersen, published by Newman Springs Publishing, so you can find it everywhere, Amazon, or Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Scott, thank you so much again for joining me tonight and telling me all about this. I had a really nice time.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciated the conversation. It's always wonderful to talk to somebody that obviously loves books as much as you do.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.